Her life had always been a background blur, a quiet existence ignored by everyone around her, until the day her mother handed her a plane ticket and whispered words that felt like betrayal. You're going to marry a man you've never met. He's wealthy, mysterious, and he won't care how plain you are. For the first time, Mirabel Scout realized the life she had known was about to shatter, and nothing would ever be ordinary again. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. Mirabel sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at the worn wooden floor as the morning sunlight slanted through the thin blinds, casting stripes across her plain, soft features. She had tied her long, fair hair into a loose ponytail, the way she always did for work at the cafe, and tugged at the faded sweater her mother had given her for warmth. Her reflection in the mirror above the dresser seemed like a stranger. She recognized the shape of her face, the pale green of her eyes, but she could not see the courage she would soon need to summon. "You're not listening." Her mother's sharp voice cut through the silence, echoing in the small apartment that had always felt more like a trap than a home. "Mirabel, you don't have time to waste. London isn't waiting for someone boring and timid. This is your chance, your only chance, to escape mediocrity and become someone people envy." Mirabel shook her head, the words sticking in her throat. "Mom, I don't even know him. How am I supposed to?" "Stop talking," her mother snapped, cutting her off with a glare that could have frozen water. "You'll take the flight. You'll meet him. You'll do as you're told. That's final." The ticket felt heavier than any burden Mirabel had ever carried. She traced the bold black letters. London, United Kingdom, a city she had only ever seen in films and magazines, now a place that would decide her entire future. She had heard whispers about the man she was to marry. A reclusive billionaire, eccentric, private, some even whispered he was something more. But she pushed those thoughts aside, grounding herself in the one thing she still had control over, herself. At the airport, the hum of travelers and the sharp scent of jet fuel pressed against her senses. Mirabel clutched her small carry-on, feeling exposed in her plain jeans and loose sweater. People bustled past, strangers' eyes flicking over her and immediately moving on. She felt invisible in a way that had become almost normal for her. But today, invisibility was terrifying. Today, she was going to step into a world where invisibility could be fatal, or worse, permanent. The flight felt endless. Hours dragged by as she stared out at the clouds, thinking of all the warnings her mother had whispered like poison in her ears. He might be cold. He might be cruel. He might never even look at you. The thought made her stomach twist, but deep down, Mirabel knew she could not turn back. Not now. Not after a life spent quietly obeying without question. When she finally arrived in London, the air was sharp and foreign, carrying the scent of rain, stone, and history. She followed a driver who had been sent to collect her, winding through streets lined with Gothic buildings that seemed alive with secrets. Her heart thumped in a rhythm that echoed the quiet anxiety she had carried for years. The mansion loomed before her, massive and imposing, its black stone facade broken by shattered windows and creeping ivy. The grandeur of it should have awed her, but instead, it made her feel small, fragile, as though she were about to walk into a world not meant for her. "You're early," a deep, smooth voice spoke from the doorway. Mirabel froze, her eyes flicking toward the shadowed figure stepping into the dim light of the hall. He was impossibly tall, his presence commanding the space in a way that made every instinct in her body scream both awe and fear. Icy pale skin, black hair slicked back to reveal a sharp, angular face, eyes like liquid night, piercing and unreadable. He studied her with a stillness that made it feel like he could see into her very soul. I'm Mirabel Scout," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling despite her efforts to appear composed. He inclined his head slightly, his expression neutral but curious. "Mirabel, I've heard of you. The words were simple, but the way he said them, measured, deliberate, made her pulse race. Everything about him was overwhelming. The air seemed to thicken around him, charged with something she couldn't name. He was a storm contained in a man, ancient and dangerous, yet undeniably magnetic. And here she was, just a girl from Tennessee, standing in the doorway of his mansion, her life about to be rewritten. Days passed, each one unfolding in layers of tension and unexpected connection. Mirabel discovered that the rumors were true. He was cold, private, and enigmatic. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it felt as though the world itself held its breath. And yet, despite his imposing presence, she noticed small cracks, tiny glimpses of fascination, of care, whenever she spoke with honesty, whenever she showed courage she didn't know she had. One evening, as rain pelted the windows and the house groaned against the wind, he found her sitting in the vast library, a cup of tea trembling in her hands. "You should not be afraid of me," he said quietly, voice barely more than a whisper. "Fear is for those who do not understand. And you're trying to understand." Mirabel swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. I don't even know how to be here. This world, it's so different from mine." He stepped closer, the shadows shifting with him. "Then show me yours. Show me who you are beneath all the fear and doubt." For the first time in her life, someone saw her. Not her plainness, not her timidity, not the life she had always felt trapped in, but her. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Confidence began to take root, tiny at first, then growing. The fear that had always defined her life began to loosen its grip. And then the whispers started. London society, media outlets, social circles, they all noticed. The quiet girl from Tennessee who had arrived, trembling and cautious, was now the one capturing the attention of the most mysterious, feared man in the city. The human who had been plain and overlooked was slowly becoming the envy of a world she had never thought she could belong to. Yet even as the world's eyes turned toward her, Mirabel remained grounded, her humility intact. She had learned the truth about her mother's intentions, but she had also discovered something far more powerful than money or status. Love, raw and transformative, in the form of a man who saw her, truly saw her, and treasured her above all else. In those early days, with shadows and candlelight dancing across the vast mansion walls, she realized something else too. This life would demand bravery, resilience, and heart. And she was ready to give it all. Not for her mother, not for the whispers of London, but for herself, and for the man who had made her feel seen for the first time in her life. Her ordinary life had ended. Her extraordinary one had begun. Want to see how Mirabel's life in London unfolds? How she navigates love, power, and the envy of a city that never expected her? Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe and follow her journey as she transforms from overlooked girl to the most desired woman in the UK. The first week in London felt like a dream suspended between reality and a fairy tale Mirabel had never dared imagine. Every corner of the Varton mansion held secrets she was only beginning to understand. Long corridors lined with dark portraits, velvet drapes that muted the sound of the storm outside, and rooms filled with books she couldn't yet read fast enough to comprehend. She spent hours wandering, each step a quiet rebellion against the fear that had followed her from Nashville. The first week in London felt like a dream suspended between reality and a fairy tale Mirabel had never dared imagine. Every corner of the Varton mansion held secrets she was only beginning to understand. Long corridors lined with dark portraits, velvet drapes that muted the sound of the storm outside, and rooms filled with books she couldn't yet read fast enough to comprehend. She spent hours wandering, each step a quiet rebellion against the fear that had followed her from Nashville. Lord Kaelith observed her with the same calculated patience he applied to every aspect of his life. At first, she assumed it was indifference, but slowly she began to notice the small signs of his attention. The way he adjusted a chair near her when she sat reading, the faint scent of him lingering in a hallway after he had passed, the way his gaze softened when she laughed, a rare, unrestrained sound that had begun to echo through the grand halls. One evening, Mirabel sat by the fireplace in the sitting room, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea, staring into the dancing flames. The rain pelted the windows again, and the mansion seemed to breathe with the storm outside. Kaelith entered quietly, his movements fluid, almost predatory, but there was no menace in his eyes tonight. Instead, there was curiosity, a question she felt she should answer before he spoke. "You are different from what I expected," he said softly, standing near the mantel. His pale face was half illuminated by the fire, shadows emphasizing the sharp angles of his features. "Not in appearance. You are fair, delicate, but in spirit. There is a steadiness in you that unsettles me." Mirabel's breath caught. "Unsettles you?" she repeated, a mix of apprehension and intrigue in her voice. He nodded slowly. "Yes. Most people bend, break, or try to impress me. You remain yourself. That is rare." The words, simple though they were, wrapped around her heart. For the first time since leaving Nashville, Mirabel felt seen. Not for what she lacked, but for what she possessed. A strange warmth coursed through her, a confidence that had only just begun to take root. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of their lives began to settle. Mirabel learned the house's routines, the way Kaelith preferred his meals, the subtle changes in his demeanor when the night deepened. She noticed the loneliness that clung to him like a second skin. It wasn't something he admitted openly, but in the fleeting moments, the sigh as he stared out at the darkened gardens, the rare moments of distraction while tending to some unseen thought, she understood. And she began to care. One afternoon, while Kaelith was reviewing documents in his study, Mirabel wandered the upper corridors and discovered a small music room tucked away behind heavy drapes. Dust covered the piano, and the notes of a song lingered faintly in the air, as if the room remembered the melodies of the past. She pressed a tentative hand to the keys, producing a soft, uneven note. It didn't matter. The sound was enough to pull Kaelith from his work, his expression softening as he approached. "You play?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I try," Mirabel admitted, cheeks tinged pink. He stepped closer, and for the first time, he allowed her to see a glimpse of his centuries-long life etched in the depth of his gaze. "Music, it reveals truths that words cannot," he said. Mirabel looked up, searching his eyes. "Do you feel lonely, even now?" His lips pressed into a thin line, a moment of hesitation. "I have lived far longer than most, and yet the heart craves connection. Even one such as I, eternal, cannot escape the ache of solitude." For the first time, Mirabel did not feel fear. She felt compassion, understanding, and a desire to reach out, to bridge the gulf that had existed between them. Tentatively, she placed her hand on the piano keys again, and he moved closer, letting the music fill the room with something neither had experienced in centuries, a shared intimacy, a fragile thread of trust. It was during this quiet intimacy that Mirabel realized her life was transforming. She no longer doubted herself. Her confidence grew, not the loud, brash confidence of someone desperate for attention, but a quiet, grounded strength. The same hands that had once fumbled with teacups now moved gracefully over the piano keys. The same timid voice now spoke clearly, articulating opinions and thoughts she had kept hidden for years. London society, too, began to notice. Invitations to events came without explanation. Whispers followed her in corridors, and photographs of her and Kaelith in the mansion's gardens appeared in magazines. Headlines read, "The human who enchanted a vampire billionaire and Tennessee girl becomes London's envy." At first, she ignored the attention, but the thrill was undeniable. Even those who had once dismissed her as plain now looked on with envy and fascination. Yet with attention came danger. Not all eyes were friendly, and not all hearts held goodwill. One evening, while exploring the mansion's extensive grounds, Mirabel encountered a figure lurking in the shadows, a woman dressed in the kind of fashion meant to intimidate and provoke. Her lips curled in a disdainful smile as she approached. "You must be the girl," the woman said, voice dripping with venom. "The one everyone is suddenly obsessed with. I hope you understand your place." Mirabel straightened, her newfound confidence steadying her voice. "I'm exactly where I belong," she said, her tone calm but firm. The woman laughed, sharp and cruel. Bold words for someone who came from Tennessee to play at society. "Do you really think he would care for someone like you?" The words stung, and for a moment, doubt flickered in Mirabel's mind. But then Kaelith stepped forward from the shadows, his presence like a wall of ice and fire combined. The woman froze as he spoke, each word deliberate and lethal in its calm authority. "She is not here for your approval," Kaelith said, his voice low and deadly. "Nor will she ever be." The intruder backed away, retreating into the night, leaving Mirabel trembling, but not from fear. From that moment, she realized something crucial. Kaelith's love was both her shield and her sword. She was no longer invisible. No one would be able to dismiss her without consequence. As the days progressed, Mirabel and Kaelith's connection deepened. Their interactions were no longer formal or distant. They dined together, strolled the gardens, and shared conversations that stretched long into the night. She discovered humor in his rare smiles, a tenderness in his touch, and a vulnerability he allowed only for her. It was during one of these nights, beneath the glow of the moon, that Mirabel felt the full force of her transformation. She had spent so many years shrinking herself to fit into the shadows, to avoid being noticed, to blend into a world that didn't see her. But here, with Kaelith, she had grown into someone unrecognizable even to herself, someone strong, desired, and unforgettable. "I never thought I could be like this," she admitted softly, gazing up at him. "Confident, seen, wanted. I thought I was just plain ordinary. But you've changed everything." Kaelith's eyes softened, and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, Mirabel, you were always extraordinary. I only reminded you." The world merely needed to catch up. A warm, thrilling confidence spread through her chest. She realized then that this love, unexpected, fierce, and transformative, was the catalyst that had unlocked her potential. She wasn't merely surviving in a new city. She was thriving, evolving, and slowly becoming the envy of every eye that fell upon her. Even so, Mirabel could not ignore the world outside the mansion. Social media buzzed with speculation about her relationship with Kaelith. Gossip circulated through the elite circles of London, both admiring and criticizing the human girl who dared to capture the heart of a vampire billionaire. She was becoming a symbol, a testament to love, audacity, and transformation. One evening, as she scrolled through messages and notifications, her phone buzzed with a headline that made her pause. From Nashville to nobility. The girl who conquered a vampire lord. Comments flooded in, some praising her courage, others expressing disbelief that someone so ordinary could claim the attention of the mysterious Kaelith Varden. A question lingered in her mind, almost teasing her thoughts. If a person could be so overlooked for so long, what does it take for someone to finally see their true worth? It was a question she intended to answer, not just for herself, but for every young woman who had ever felt invisible. Her mother's earlier words, once sharp and cutting, now seemed irrelevant. Mirabel had claimed her own place in a world that had always seemed out of reach. And as Kaelith joined her on the terrace, leaning close and whispering words that made her pulse race, she realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was conquering, flourishing, and unapologetically herself. The city lights of London stretched before them, sparkling like a constellation of possibilities. And in that glow, Mirabel Scout, the once plain, overlooked girl from Tennessee, understood the truth of her journey. Love could transform, courage could empower, and the world could indeed be enchanted by a girl brave enough to step into the storm. As the night deepened and Kaelith's presence remained steady and reassuring beside her, she let out a small, contented sigh. This was only the beginning. London, love, and life itself awaited, and she would meet it all with grace, strength, and the quiet fire that had been growing within her all along. Mirabel's growing confidence and transformation. The romantic connection deepening with Kaelith. Tension from social circles and potential rivals. The early morning mist clung to the streets of London, curling around lamp posts and casting soft shadows on the cobblestone paths below. Mirabel Scout had long since grown accustomed to the grandeur and mystery of the Vartan mansion, but today felt different, electric, alive, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Today, she was no longer just a guest in Kaelith's world. She was a part of it, woven into the very fabric of a life that once seemed unattainable. For weeks, whispers have been spreading faster than she could have imagined. Society journals, elite social circles, and even online forums have become obsessed with her transformation. Headlines hailed the human girl who conquered a vampire billionaire, the plain Tennessee girl turned London's envy, and the enchantress who tamed centuries-old power. Mirabel had read the stories, felt the stares, and accepted the attention with a quiet confidence she had never possessed before. Yet, despite the fascination and admiration, she remained grounded. The core of her strength had always come from the person she was, not the world's approval. Kaelith watched her from across the room, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes betrayed a mixture of pride and admiration. He had seen her growth firsthand, the courage in her steps, the elegance in her posture, the way her laughter now filled spaces that had once been silent. He had also seen the challenges, the jealous rivals, the probing journalists, the subtle attempts by society's elite to undermine her. But she had faced them all with poise, intelligence, and the unwavering authenticity that had first captured his attention. "Mirabel," he said quietly, crossing the room to stand behind her, his long fingers brushing against the back of her chair. "Do you understand what you've accomplished?" She turned, smiling softly. "I don't know if I've accomplished anything. I've only lived, Kaelith. I've only been myself." He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No, you've done more than that. You've taken a world that dismissed you and made it notice. Not for appearances, not for status, but for your heart, your courage, your essence. That is no small feat." The city outside began to stir, the mist lifting to reveal London's gleaming skyline. Mirabel looked out the window, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet cafes of Nashville to the imposing corridors of the Vartan mansion, every moment had shaped her. Every challenge had strengthened her, and every interaction with Kaelith had taught her the value of being seen and cherished. But life, as she had learned, was never without trials. That evening, an invitation arrived, bearing the royal crest of a prestigious gala. It was an event attended by the most influential figures of the UK, an opportunity to cement her place in society. The invitation, however, was more than a formality. It was a test. Those who had doubted her would be there, their eyes sharp, their whispers sharper. She knew that walking into the room would require not just confidence, but courage beyond anything she had known. As the night descended, Mirabel donned a gown of deep emerald, its silk shimmering in the soft candlelight. Her fair hair was styled elegantly, cascading in soft waves over her shoulders, and her makeup was subtle yet refined, highlighting the natural beauty that had once gone unnoticed. She looked in the mirror and did not see the plain, overlooked girl from Tennessee. She saw a woman of strength, grace, and magnetism, someone capable of commanding attention without demanding it. Kaelith entered silently, his presence immediately filling the room. He wore a tailored black suit, his long dark hair framing the same pale, striking features that had captivated her from the beginning. When he saw her, a rare, genuine smile touched his lips, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. "You look remarkable," he said, his voice low, intimate, and filled with a warmth he rarely displayed to anyone. Mirabel felt her cheeks warm, but returned his gaze steadily. "And you make even the most imposing halls feel safe." Together, they entered the gala. The chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and the crowd's murmurs shifted the moment they appeared. Eyes followed them, whispers swirling around them like a storm. Society's elite, who had once dismissed her as a plain girl from a small town in Tennessee, now watched her with fascination, envy, and undeniable admiration. Rivals approached, some with polite smiles masking jealousy, others with thinly veiled disdain. But Mirabel remained composed, her interactions confident and gracious. She greeted each guest with poise, her laughter genuine, her words measured yet warm. Every glance, every subtle smile, and every graceful gesture cemented her presence. One woman, a socialite who had made no secret of her disdain for Mirabel, approached with a forced smile. "I never expected you to rise to this level," she said, her tone dripping with subtle venom. Mirabel met her eyes steadily. "I've only ever risen to the level I believed I deserved," she replied calmly. The woman's jaw tightened, and she turned away, leaving Mirabel standing taller than before. Kaelith's hand found hers, and their fingers intertwined naturally. "Do you see?" he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to the back of her hand. "This world cannot define you. You define yourself." The night continued, a whirlwind of introductions, applause, and recognition. Mirabel felt a quiet thrill as she realized the truth of her journey. She was no longer invisible. The girl who had been overlooked and underestimated had transformed into a woman whose presence commanded attention, whose confidence inspired respect, and whose heart had captured the deepest affections of a man whose power and mystery had once been intimidating. As the gala drew to a close, Kaelith led her to a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was crisp, carrying the sense of rain-soaked streets and distant gardens. London sprawled beneath them, a city of lights and possibilities. "You've done more than survive here," Kaelith said softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've flourished. You've become the woman you were always meant to be. And I am honored to walk this path with you." Tears prickled at Mirabel's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she had achieved what she had never dared to dream. "I couldn't have done it alone," she whispered, "and I couldn't imagine anyone else by my side." He smiled, his pale features glowing in the moonlight. "Then let us face the world together, not as predator and prey, human and immortal, or outsider and elite, but as partners, as equals." In that moment, Mirabel felt the culmination of every challenge, every moment of doubt, every fear she had carried from her quiet life in Tennessee melt away. She had conquered more than the scrutiny of society or the shadow of her mother's ambitions. She had conquered the part of herself that had believed she was invisible, and she had found love that saw her, not as a plain girl from a small town, but as a remarkable, unforgettable woman. The weeks that followed were filled with opportunities, recognition, and the quiet joy of a life lived fully. Mirabel continued to navigate London's high society with grace, her presence commanding respect, admiration, and yes, envy. But more importantly, she did so while remaining true to herself, humble, kind, and authentic. Journalists clamored for interviews, social media buzzed with her name, and invitations arrived for events that once would have been unimaginable. Yet through it all, her heart remained grounded in the mansion that had become her home, with a vampire who had seen her and loved her long before anyone else had noticed. One evening, as they stood together in the library, Kaelith brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle and familiar. "Do you remember when you first arrived?" he asked, his voice soft. Mirabel smiled, a small laugh escaping her lips. "I was terrified. I thought I would be lost in this world forever." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "And now, she said, her eyes shining, "I am alive. I am seen. I am unstoppable." Kaelith pulled her close, his embrace protective and tender. "And you always will be. Together, nothing can undo what we've built." As the night deepened, Mirabel looked out over the city that had once seemed so daunting, now illuminated by the glow of her triumphs. She had arrived as a quiet, plain girl from Tennessee, sold into a life she feared, yet she had emerged transformed, confident, and adored. The world had witnessed her rise, but only Kaelith had seen the heart that made it all possible. In the warmth of their shared silence, Mirabel Scout understood the truth of her journey. Life was not about who noticed you first, who underestimated you, or who doubted your worth. It was about embracing yourself, walking into the unknown with courage, and allowing love, unexpected, fierce, and transformative, to illuminate your path. And so, with the moon casting silver light upon her fair hair and Kaelith's steady presence beside her, Mirabel knew that the girl who had once been overlooked was now a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had claimed her place, her love, and her destiny, and who would never again be invisible. The world had finally caught up. Mirabel's full transformation and recognition in society. Climactic confrontation with rivals. Emotional and romantic climax with Kaelith. Satisfying conclusion. Victory, love, and self-realization. Full tie back to her journey from plain, overlooked girl to empowered, envied woman. Mirabel Scout's journey from a quiet, overlooked girl in Tennessee to the envy of London and the heart of the mysterious vampire Kaelith reminds us all that courage, authenticity, and love can transform even the most ordinary life into something extraordinary. Sparkles want to see more stories of love, transformation, and unexpected destiny? Don't miss out. Subscribe now and follow Mirabel's next adventures. Your next unforgettable story is just a click away.